Education meeting to order. Ask everyone to please rise. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So this is the time that's reserved for public comment. Anyone in the audience tonight wishing to make any comments publicly?
Paul, can I just point out, we need everybody to talk really loud so that we can pick up the sound on the recording.
Get that? Talk really loud as we talk over the air conditioning tonight. All right, no public comments, so I'll move on to consent agenda items. Ask for a motion to approve those items.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion regarding those items? That's the approval of the minutes and statements of receipts and expenditures. If none, all in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Okay, action items. Jeff, your report.
Yes, so we have a number of things that we'll read, and then I have some other things to add as well. But we have 3 of our students we want to recognize at the high school with their photography awards. So McKenna Amundsen, Sophia De La Pasca, and Sadie Monreal received special awards from the Photographic Society of America for its annual National Photography Show. Their artwork or their photography will be displayed in Utah in October of 2018. McKenna achieved the highest honor of first place for her print image and received a monetary award of $175. So very cool, great for them. I saw Marcia today at the end of school and was talking to her about that. So it's great to have our students recognized in that way. And then earlier we also had Grafton High School was named to the Best High Schools 2018 list from U.S. News and World Report. They earned a silver status, which put them in the number 13th high school in the state of Wisconsin. So congratulations to the high school and being recognized in that way. And then on Sunday, we had graduation, and there was 177 seniors from the class of 2018 that graduated. Thanks to the entire board for being there and being able to shake kids' hands, hand their diploma covers, and it was a great day. We have had discussions, big thank you to the fire department that was there on that day because of the heat. It was the hottest day on record, and so we did have some people have some heat exhaustion, and they dealt with them, and some other communities actually helped us as well. But Mr. Manti and I discussed, it's 2 years in a row now that we've had probably the hottest day, and it could have been in June because we're early, so it could have been later, and having that 1 o'clock time has always been the tradition. Always, but in the recent history, it's always been 1 o'clock. But we are going to look to survey our parent, the senior class next year, to say, is there a different time frame that may get us out of that 1 o'clock time slot where it's so hot? So would that be a Saturday night under the lights? Might be a great opportunity. Maybe it's in the morning, could be Sunday morning, could be Saturday morning, that would go with that. So we are going to look to see if there's a different time that might get us out of that hot part of the day, the most warm part of the day for that. So that's something that Scott will be working on in the fall, surveying parents and so forth. But big shout out to Mr. Manti and his whole staff for all the work that they did, getting everything ready. The maintenance department was a huge help getting people parked, technology department, with all the other things they have going on. They were also helping us get sound set up for outside and making sure people can hear. So it's just a lot of people doing things for that's one of the biggest days in the district is graduation. It's that pinnacle for our students, and seeing them cross that stage was great to see. So we're working on that. So then we have the following seniors who earned special recognitions. So our valedictorian was Abigail Cibulka, so Abby Cibulka. Alyssa Lanza was our salutatorian. Academic top 10 was Michael Ancio, Abigail Cibulka, Matthew Fisher, Gretchen Geiser, Alyssa Job, Catherine Knott, Alyssa Lanza, Sarah Schmitz, Gordon Thompson, and Tyler Wolter. And then at graduation, they announced the 2 students that received the Black Hawk Award. And so that's an award given to the top senior that represents everything that we look for in a student, whether it's a strong academics, a strong character, being involved in a lot of different things. The staff vote on that award, so it's very prestigious to be awarded in that way. And Gordy Thompson and Gretchen Geiser were students that were selected for that. So Gretchen is on the soccer team. They're still playing. They play on Thursday night in the first round of regionals. Abby Sabolka, our valedictorian, is in track and is competing in the state championships in that. So great to see some students get recognized in that way. And Sunday was a fun day, and a great opportunity we finished it just as the rain was starting. So an hour and 15 minutes was really good timing. Luckily there wasn't 197 graduates because we've probably been wet, but it worked out very well. And then the community farewell. So with Friday was the last day of school for our students, and I was at Woodview when the day ended, and I know talking with Craig and as well as staff at GES, that was a hard day for not just GES, because GES is closing, but also for students that go to Kennedy or students that go to Woodview or staff that are at one of those schools that are also transferring next year. And so seeing people give people hugs and saying goodbye was a bittersweet day for a lot of different people. Excitement in what it's going to look like in the fall, but at the same time, having had great experiences in their current environment really was bittersweet for them. So on Monday, the June 4th, Shireen Mortag, who's the advisor for Student Council at GES, is organizing a community farewell from 5 to 8. So we've been announcing it, in our email blast. You've seen the sign out in front, and we'll have students that will be taking people around on tours and so forth. So for that final community farewell at GES, and as we've sort of looked at various things, and we've found some different treasures that have been hidden in various places. So here's a Grafton High School diploma, Walter Ernst, in very good calligraphy you have to look at. And the high school has one of these, but this one says 1917. I think theirs is either 1919 or 1921 or something like that, so it's a little bit older. So we found that as we were looking through some of the stuff, and then we also found the initial artist rendering of Grafton High School. So back in 1957, what that was supposed to look like. And having gone through our own construction project and a rendering, and then seeing what it actually looks like, you can actually see that the rendering from 57 is pretty accurate. And so we're trying to keep track of these types of things. These are great historical pieces that we'll be displaying in the library, the new LMC here when it gets going. But it was great to see this and to be able to see what that looked like back as a rendering with the architect of Darby, Bogner, and Associates that had created this. So we found some things like that as we've the GEF is working currently on the 4th. They're going to be they'll be selling, silent auctioning some items. And today, Aaron Shoemaker, Lisa, and Tony Tagliapietra were all in here this morning, and then they have Jake Knox, who's working on the bleachers, taking some bleachers down, and he's going to be making some different things for the Super Bowl out of those bleachers that they'll auction off at the Super Bowl. But right now, next Monday, they'll have, they took the Grafton Elementary School building letters. Those are down, so each letter is going to be auctioned off separately. They have the Wolfpack Way banners, GES frame signs, classroom and bathroom signs, gymnasium basketball hoops. We don't have a need for those. We can't use them at John Long. We looked at that. The ones that are going into the elementary schools are going to be able to be movable, so you can go up and down, so it's more appropriate for their age. So they'll be auctioning those off. They have signs from the exterior of the building. They have that big wooden ribbon for the exterior of the building, the blue ribbon. We're keeping the plaque and the proclamation that we have from the state of Wisconsin, and we will keep that. But the big blue ribbon school, they have some coat hooks, they have some desks with chairs. The small G that's currently in the upper part of the basketball hoops in the gymnasium, those are being auctioned off. They have a bathroom bench that is also part of that. And then we are working with Hoffman. The G that's in the middle of the court, Hoffman is working to have someone come in and trying to be able to cut that out and be able to use that in either the new commons or in the gym to be displayed prominently. So that we're not auctioning off, we're actually keeping that as a historical piece for the district to have. And then once we get into the demolition of GES, we'll work to have, through our email blast, a time when we'll have bricks that would be outside for people to be able to get for free. We're not going to try and, GF isn't going to try and auction those off or sell them, but it'd be one of those things that we would have Hoffman move them over there. People would have to come by and knock the mortar off of them but there'd be bricks available if someone wanted to take some, they could do that. So those are pieces that we have in place right now, and getting ready for that ending piece. So a lot of pieces going on with the end of the school year. I was able to go over to John Long Middle School for their talent show, and I didn't get to see that last year, and that is really cool. And the nighttime event was the same night that the Grafton Chamber had their annual meeting, and Paul and I both were at that. And so I'd gone during the day. So I listed some of the different students that I saw with talent. They had ballet dancers, they had gymnastics, people doing gymnastics, flute and ukulele players. They had two girls who did a traditional Indian dance. They were in Indian garb and they did an Indian dance. We had students singing. They had a Shark Tank with a reference to living in a trailer down by the river. So they had kids doing a couple different skits in one. Black light dancers. They have new lights at John Long behind the curtains that can change colors, and these kids were able to wear just white or neon, and it was glowing for them. They did a little Michael Jackson thing, and then they ended, the final group was AC/DC rendition. So a girl singing, a boy playing the electric guitar, and a boy playing the drums. They ended with that. So it was really eclectic group of talent that I saw. It was great. It was great to see. So I highly recommend that. And then a great tradition that we've had for at least 6 years is to have our fifth grade teachers. They organize having all of the fifth graders from the 3 elementary schools come together for a day, and they break them up by building, so they have to meet some new kids, but it gets them ready for going into middle school. So they got together, they had lunch together, they had all these different activities that teachers organized. They did it at Centennial Park, and I was able to go over there and see that, and just kudos to our fifth grade teachers. It's all run by them, some great leadership occurring with them doing that and organizing it and breaking kids up. And at the end of the year, you're not looking for one more thing, but they do that and really did a great job. And it's a great way to get kids feeling a little bit more comfortable of moving into middle school, knowing other kids and recognizing kids and so forth. And teachers that said, it's amazing when they get partnered up at the beginning, and then by the end of the day, how they feel about those same kids. So there's some team building things they do. They, play kickball. There's, they're playing on the jungle gym stuff. But there's still all these different things that they're doing, which is really great, and it's all organized by our fifth grade teachers. So kudos to them and their hard work with that. So, and then my final thing is just a reminder for the board as well as the community that our June and July meetings will be held at John Long Middle School in the LMC. So starting next week, we will have, or is it starting on Friday here? We're closing the high school. The high school will start being closed on Friday. The high school will be closed on Friday except for the main office. So everything else will be closed. We came in this morning, and at 7 o'clock this morning, they were already knocking holes in walls through the concrete to try and get to the plumbing. This plumbing was one of the main pieces, and so they hit the ground running with that. If you stopped over at Kennedy, you'd see just a ton of dirt that's being moved as they were getting ready to get going with the exterior work there, and redoing that playground area and the driveway and so forth. And then GES today, they already have lockers that were taken out of the concrete walls that are then going over to either Woodview or Kennedy to be reused. So and then they have the cubbies as well, but they started with the lockers. We got in that main hallway from district office. All of them are out of the wall, and probably 2/3 of them have already been taken out and taken away. So a lot of action today, but we will move because we will not have, as you can tell, we don't have air conditioning now, and we will not have air conditioning in the high school until late in the summer. And with just not having space, we'll be at John Long. So John Long will really be our only school that's available across the district. Woodview and Kennedy will also be shut down by Monday. No one should be in those buildings. We've already allocated principals to different areas, and using conference rooms and John Long Middle School to be able to do that. So we'll be at John Long Middle School for the next 2 months. And that completes my report.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? In terms of the pack up at GES, everything's on pace?
Yes. So I can give you that now. I had the construction update.
Perfect.
Yep. Construction update. I'll walk you through every day what we're doing.
All right. Excellent. All right. Committee reports. First, let's hear from the policy committee. Steve, on May 7th.
Yes, we met on May 7th with our newly formed. Carrie and now Joe has joined us on the policy committee. We had 2 action items on the agenda. One, we had a presentation from WASB and Neola. WASB is who we are currently using. After hearing both presentations, there was a recommendation of the committee that we'll be voting on later today to change and proceed with Neola going forward. So that will come up in a little bit later in the agenda. And then the second thing that we had is we had another, probably a first, second / reading of the naming rights. So we went through a couple different samples that have been provided to us and then some additional information as we continue to move forward. Our next policy meeting will be June 11th. I'm assuming that will also be in the John Long Library. And one of the things that we'll look at will be continuing to look at the naming rights and trying to understand what we want to present to the newly formed private-public committee.
Any questions for Steve? Thank you, Steve. Finance Committee, Mark.
So yes, Finance Committee also met May 7th. Paul and Jerry and myself were on the Finance Committee. Topher presented the preliminary budget, which we will be talking about a little bit later. But that evening we did ask a lot of questions and reviewed where things are at, with things going up, things going down in terms of revenue and expenses. A lot of good questions and a lot of good answers. So we'll be seeing that a little bit later.
All right. Mark, also the public-private partnership.
So yes, May 7th, we officially formed the Public-Private Partnership Committee, and we will be looking at prioritizing those facility needs within the district and working with administration on what those are and prioritizing those, like I said, looking at the avenue of how we want to proceed with trying to raise funds to make those happen, and then ultimately coming up with a plan for making it happen. And so that's kind of where we're at, and we'll be talking again soon. Anything else to add from you guys?
No. Any questions for Mark? Last but not least, Joe on marketing and communications.
Yes, our last marketing communications meeting, John, on our committee now is Carrie, myself, and John. We talked about our next steps, about where we were going to go with the marketing communication, and the committee members, we discussed maybe, I think we were in the agreement that we would want to have some possibilities of discussing maybe opening it up and working more with the village and the town. These are some ideas that came about, even maybe including the Chamber of Commerce, and further expanding our communication to students, parents, and alumni. Steve, you brought that up. And also the community as a whole, and maybe doing some community surveys. So we just wanted to bring that up. Am I missing anything, Carrie? No? So just kind of for discussion to see how we want to talk about it with the board, to see if you have any ideas on where this could
Discussion
go.
this evening.
Is it a discussion this evening, or?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
talk about it this evening.
Should
It
we?
was we did not get a formal recommendation from the committee, but it was an agreement between the committee of this was an area to increase the scope of the communication committee, changing as it has gone from being mainly about educating people about the referendum to now focusing more on the communication with the community and with local stakeholders.
Yeah, we talked about the newsletter that we'd sent out and having a graphic. I was late to the meeting personally, but they worked on a graphic to add to that, to the newsletter, and how we're communicating with the community and when that will be. And we talked about the annual meeting and all those different things. So just more of a communication piece. But then, as you said, is it working more with the village? Is it working with the town, the chamber? How do we continue that dialogue that has been great as we've been moving through the referendum process and the construction process? How do we sort of establish some lines of communication with various areas?
There is or has been, they say, a liaison committee with the village. I don't know that that is an official committee of the village or an official committee of the district, but I think we probably ought to formalize that process.
And Joe had looked at, and you'd seen
Yeah, I
that the
looked it up,
village. Yeah.
that it is on the website, and there were 2 representatives I saw.
I know,
Tom, is there Krieger?
Yes.
And Lisa Hartman. Yes.
And that's what we talked about, was
Right.
we'd known that it happened, and I don't think any of us were here at the time, or was someone, were you on the committee, were you on the board when we used to have those meetings? I think we were thinking,
No,
that most of us
all
weren't.
us.
Yeah, you might be the only one.
but I can tell you
But we didn't
that-
have anything with the town. We don't believe anything
Right.
with the town. So we
Right.
didn't really have a historical
Right.
perspective at the committee. So that's why I think the committee didn't really have a recommendation. 'Cause it was like, well, this seems like a good idea
Right.
that we would be interested in doing, but we also, or they wanted to bring it forward to you, to
Right,
the
I think-
group.
You're right. There's, to the best of my knowledge, there's never been anything relative to the town. The village, it's all been ad hoc on an issue-by-issue basis. So I think we could, and I can say that, I don't know that I was ever a standing member of that committee, maybe I was a long time ago. If we've met 5 times in the last 10 years, I would bet that's about it. So while both parties may have named representation, I don't know that there's a whole lot actually occurring.
Sure.
And I think we would be well served by changing that. Let's name the parties and agree to meet quarterly. Let's agree to meet. I suspect that there is plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
So, can you reach out to them?
Yeah.
You know, from
I think the committee felt strongly they'd like to do something, is what
Right.
I heard from the
Right.
committee.
Right, we were thinking probably at least semi-annual,
At least get something started.
And
Yeah.
get used to meeting and just
Just getting each
connecting.
other updates and
And then
highlights.
same thing, I happened to run into Pam King, from the Commerce, and she said she's really enjoyed working with Jeff, and especially, as the focus goes forward, as referendums moving on,
Yep.
would be to even have part of the board as a committee, just touch base, even if it's just once a year, on how's local businesses, and then messages we're trying to get out and messages they were trying to get out.
Well, and as we've talked about this, that once we have our construction projects finished, it is going to be communicating, setting up communication meetings with various stakeholders, whether it's real estate agents, whether it's chamber, like how are we getting out the good news of what we offer in our district? And so, the newsletter is one piece, but that's for our current residents, and how do we market and attract people to come into our community or to see us as a viable opportunity versus other districts or other private schools or whatever it may be. So having those communication and even having that relationship so that if I have a question, I know who to call or they know who to call is just as critical.
But I want to make sure that we're not mixing 2 things, right? Because I would say that there's an element of marketing strategy that the district itself should develop and deploy, right? And then there's an element of communication amongst 2 government agencies within the village. And they're not the same, in my mind. They're 2 different things, right? And one isn't, the board marketing and communication committee isn't responsible, or at least in my mind, shouldn't be responsible for the development of that marketing strategy.
No, and they aren't. What the marketing communication committee has been very useful and beneficial to our district for is bringing ideas forward, saying this is what we're thinking. What are your thoughts on this? How does this look? Even looking at the website, like how does it looks very good to me because I use it all the time. How do you feel? Like all those pieces that it gives us an outside voice. It gives us community members can come to that meeting. So we have some that come and give feedback. So it's been very beneficial. In that way, similar to other committees, whether it's finance or policy, we're bringing ideas forward, and the committee is giving us guidelines as our feedback to say, yeah, but you're moving forward, and that we're going in the right direction. So it's been beneficial. So yeah, hearing that, I can move forward and set something up, and then get with the committee, and just like as any, we'll post for a quorum so other people can come, as we do with other things.
Good. Any other comments, questions, feedback?
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Joe. All right, personnel report.
Yes, we have a new hire that we had asked the board to approve, Matthew Bardwell, a Spanish instructor for Grafton High School. Matthew is a Grafton High School graduate, I ran into Shireen Mortag the day after I'd met with Matthew, and he was also her son's best man at his wedding. So she was thrilled that he was coming back here, and he has taught at Hartford for, I think it was 5 years, and then 4 years, and then was in Spain for a year getting his master's, and now is just coming back into the area. So we're happy to have him be joining our staff. And then we'd ask the board to approve these resignations for Sean Barron, special ed instructor at Grafton High School, Sharon Eccles, special ed instructor at Grafton High School, Katie Schwalbach, Spanish instructor at Grafton High School, and Karen Knoll, principal at Grafton Elementary School, who got a job earlier. So we're happy for Karen. And then informational only resignations: Tammy Dutter, special education aide at Grafton High School, Robert Jacoby, special ed aide at Grafton High School, Tiffany Latour, kindergarten aide at Kennedy, David Polasek, special ed aide at Grafton High School, Melissa O'Connor, library clerk at John Long, and Jennifer Ernest, kindergarten aide at Kennedy. And then our changes in position are Barbie Cotton moving to library clerk at Woodview, Jennifer Juder, elementary office assistant at Kennedy, and Jamie Kaler, elementary office assistant at Kennedy. We would ask you to approve the hire and resignations.
So I'd entertain a motion for the hire and the 4 resignations as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Jen. Now, Topher, 2018-19 preliminary budget.
Yes, so this is going to be some similar information that I presented, I'll use my teacher voice, at the Finance Committee meeting. I'll start with the revenue piece here. So you've got the memo in your packet, along with some other additional information. And starting with the revenue, we have basically a decrease in our revenue limit, the Fund 10 portion, of about $243,000. Now, some of that would be $30,000 related to the increased levy into Fund 41, which decreases revenue in Fund 10, but we've also increased revenue related to some of our school fees to counterbalance that. In addition, some of this is around $122,000, $123,000 of additional levying into Fund 38 to pay for a recent debt issue. However, that also is counterbalanced by decreases in our expected utility budgets for next year. So, all in all, if we could bring up, I just want to touch on the and look at the revenue projection piece. This is really kind of the backdrop. Sorry. One more. There we go. I just wanted to touch base on this again. I talked about this back in January or February about projecting out and seeing where we may be in 2019, 2020 with these the loss of these exemptions. Our budget this upcoming year, while we're looking at losing in our revenue limit calculation about $95,000 because we have these exemptions dropping off from last year. And I'll point out that we start essentially with that base, but because we're losing kids, we're projecting to lose 11 kids, our base calculation drops. That's replaced though with the hold harmless. So this green section plus the yellow section really just puts us back up to last year's green number. And then the orange number, the 115,000, has to replace both the yellow, the hold harmless exemption, and the declining enrollment exemption for next year. The 115 does not replace the 210, so we're losing that $94,000. The concern as we look at this 2018-19 budget is the potential loss of the $230,000 of exemptions as we head into 2019-20 and perhaps not replacing it. Now we're projecting a loss of just 3 students. Now that would create a hold harmless exemption that would bring us back up to the 1819 green number, 21.185 million. And then we get an additional 31,000. But it's certainly not out of hand to expect that potentially that 3-year membership average might be the same. It might be 2019 members that following year, in which case we would get no exemptions and we would lose the entire $230,000. And so it's sort of a backdrop as we prepare our 18-19 budget to kind of look at where we're expending our funds. So I just want to touch base on that to sort of lay the groundwork there. But getting back to talking about our revenue, so we have that loss really of $94,000 in revenue, but we do have an increase in that per pupil aid of about $405,000 that we're able to use in our revenue. And then looking at our expenditures, some of the assumptions in our expenditure budget are teacher salary increases between 2.25 and 2.45%. That includes a 1.5% increase to base wages. It also includes a increase in the longevity bump of about $61,500. That's actually already changed as we move through May and June. We have certain retirements, and that does affect those numbers. So often when I get this information and developed and published and out to you, by the time we meet, it does change. And then the $65,000 in learning-based compensation, which again, that's why I have that range of 2.25% to 2.45%, because they're not, that's the maximum that they could get. We have that budgeted. Before we approve the budget, we'll know what that number actually is. It'll come down from there, thus giving a range for that teacher compensation, because that LBC, learning-based compensation, is fluid. And then also we're assuming a 2% wage increase for non-teaching staff, 10% increase in healthcare premiums, 5% increase in dental insurance premiums, and then of course we have personnel additions, reductions, adjustments, and adjustments to other line items as we continue to analyze where we're finishing this year, looking at previous historical data to figure out where we need to have certain budget line items. And so included along with this, I have the summary of our budget that shows that potential deficit of $230,000 in 2019-20, while our current 2018-19 budget is balanced currently. In addition, I have more detailed object budgets and function budgets that show you some more detail on where our expenditures and our revenues are. Are there any questions? This, by the way, I will say, is going to come back in June. There'll be plenty of changes to that June budget. You can see the number of retirements and changes in staffing that will need to be input here tonight, and undoubtedly there'll be more. The budget will be analyzed further to see what other budget adjustments can be made. Are there any questions?
Topher, remind me again, I know we discussed it at finance, but the purchase services change, what that 101,000, what that is from?
Sure. So are you talking about the three?
On your
The
summary.
310 or the summary? Okay.
Yeah.
That would be, too bad we don't record that. What was the purchase services? That would be off, a lot of that would be the utility. So that's where the purchase services lie. So thus you see the decrease in purchase services.
It looks like it's about 55,000 from electric, and 50 grand from gas.
Yeah, and again, we were using the assumption that utilities would increase 3% from last year, and then it's dialed back around $122,000, $123,000 from that number. But when compared to last year's number, it's going to be right around $107,000, $108,000.
The other thing we talked about in finance is getting on top of the benefits earlier too.
Yes, and so I've reached out to Horton, and we could meet potentially, the finance committee, in essence, could meet, or if you'd rather, the whole board could meet in July or August, and they could bring, essentially, it's a menu of options that would be available to us to decrease the premium percentage increase, that they could present to us. We could go through that, we could understand what that is, and we'd have that knowledge ahead of that September renewal. When they would come back to us with what our actual renewal would be, we'd already know what those options are for making adjustments to those benefits in order to decrease that renewal percentage.
So the options that they would look to present with plan design changes, or would they be, so plan design
There would be
changes?
plan design changes. For example, we have a premium waiver for people who might go on long-term disability that last I heard was worth maybe 1%, but it would be a menu. There's a special name for it, I forgot what it was, but they call it this menu of options that you could use to decrease that renewal premium percentage.
And then at that time, we could look as well as to possibilities for changing an employee contribution, should that be necessary or appropriate?
We could, yes.
Okay. So I would propose that the finance committee take a look at that first, and I would say in July, so that the full board could take a look at that in August, which would keep you guys on pace for that September renewal.
Sure.
Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Those covered mine as well. So. And do you need anything tonight, just information?
Yeah, we'll bring it back to the board meeting in June so that we can get approval of the preliminary budget for use starting July 1st.
It does say to approve it on the...
Does it? Oh, you don't, it's going to change, so
Okay.
when it comes to you in June, so there's no need to approve this one.
Okay, thank you, Topher. So moving on to the approval of Neola Board Policy Services. So Steve, I'll look to you. I know there was a recommendation by the Policy Committee.
Yes, so the recommendation after the discussion and the presentations from Neola was with basically where we're at today and a lot of our policies being outdated. That Neola was our best option to go and get us back to being compliant with everything, especially with all the different changes in the laws. And that once approved with them, that they would spend 5 days working with Jeff and administration to go through our entire policy, get us all updated with that. There is some flexibility that we have within those policies, that we can customize them on certain portions of it, but there would be basically boilerplates that would get us all set. And that I think it was about a 6-month period or something like that, and then we could get all back compliant with that.
And I will tell you that, on May 17th, I received an email from Mary Syrier. Mary, that name may be familiar to you. Mary was the school board president at Mequon-Thiensville at Homestead High School for a number of years. And she saw a news article about our deliberations and the fact that we were interviewing both of those firms to assist in our policy. I reached out to Mary to see if she would have an opportunity to sit down and just have coffee with myself and Steve to talk about her particular concerns, and she decided to share her concerns and her information with me on the phone last week, Thursday, or Friday afternoon, I guess it was Friday afternoon. And just her concerns are principally if you make any changes to the policy at all, what Neola recommends. Basically, their warranty, as they expressed at the policy committee meeting night, is it goes away. They don't stand behind that warranty if we Graftonize those policies. And I think, and I don't remember the individual's name, I think that was clear on his end as well. If we make changes to these things, they're not going to stand behind them. Now, Mary was on the board at Homestead for 10 years, but prior to her time of leading a committee to review these policies over a 3 to 4 year period, they did use Neola. And they use Neola almost in the same capacity that we find ourselves right now, a policy book that hadn't been updated in a long time, a need to get their arms around it in a relatively fair, short, comprehensive time frame. So her work in this extensive review of policy that took about 3 to 4 years was after Neola had already come in and really did that heavy lifting. So while I find her concerns to be of value, I think we're still at a point where our policies haven't been reviewed in depth in a number of years, right? And I would venture to say that even those that have could stand to have another set of eyes looking at them. So while I don't disagree with her concerns or her belief that, policy drives everything, there's no more important work for a board, that there's got to be a starting point. And while her concerns are noted, it seems to me that they went through that starting point 10 years ago. And 6 to 7 years after that starting point, a group of interested board members got in and used that good work that was done to dig through and revise the policies once again. So I don't know, that's what she shared, that there are some challenges with their work, and the challenges are principally because they don't tailor anything. If you want their warranty, as they talk about it, and their legal backing, you've got to accept more or less their language. And I think he talked about, and I can't remember his name, but he talked about, there are some policies that aren't necessarily legal. There are policies that are just drafted. We would put our spin on those policies. What do we want? How do we want this to be?
And that's what the administration would work to be able to say, okay, well, what are the areas that are just legal documents that are just policy? This is what it needs to be because of state law. And for us, the amount of work that Steve and I have had to do just this year of looking at our policies and coming up with sample policies. Kara's had to research various things and help us with that. There's a lot of time and effort being put into just hitting a couple policies. So for us to try and do something on a full scale in a year would be a lot. And it'll already be a lot, but at least then we're starting with something. Neola would work with administration, and I haven't done this, but Topher had, Mary Pat Seward, who was here, she's worked with Neola. The list that they gave us of all the districts that utilize Neola is extensive. I mean, it's extensive. The districts across the state that use them and have continued to use them. But we will work with them, but then the policy committee will still be reviewing those policies to bring to the board. Administration isn't approving policy. The board approves policy. The board sets policy. The board approves that in that way. And so, there'll be certain things that the board will probably have, want more input on, making it the Grafton way. Other things that just like, well, I guess that's what it's supposed to be with youth options moving to this or whatever it may be that as laws have changed.
And I will say, Mary certainly echoed that. After this 10-year removed from Neola doing their work, this policy committee in Homestead spent 3 years going over the existing policies. And I don't know how many policies we've gotten through so far since the policy committee was formed.
2 dozen.
But I would venture to say that it would take, if we had to do that initial legwork, we're talking 6 to 10 years.
As opposed to 5
work.
days.
Well, as opposed to getting a good baseline.
Right,
Yep.
correct. Starting with something.
Right.
Starting with something
Yes.
to move us forward.
So why did Homestead fall out of favor if they went through the process initially?
I think if she were sitting here, I don't know that they fell out of favor. I think they found themselves in a position where there were a number of policies that the board wanted to make their own. And as a result of making their own, they didn't see the value necessarily that Neola was providing. Because they weren't, that warranty, that guarantee isn't there. And there isn't a whole lot of give and take in terms of, what we think our policy should be. And I think Rick, the gentleman that was there that night, would say, that you guys have to decide what that policy ought to be. We're not going to be here to second guess you or to wordsmith that. Those were the things that he said. So I think they had a group of interested people, herself and two others, that committed 3 years to going through a very detailed process. She's offered to walk us through that process if we're interested. But it literally took them 3 years to go through, what was a well-established and defined baseline.
And with certain policies already, we've had to run it through legal. So if you don't have someone looking at it, Neola isn't saying that our warranty isn't backing up, then we'd have to run it through legal and incur that cost to make sure that we are still in compliance in that way.
Right.
So,
and part of her policy,
helps us with that.
right, was exactly, reliance on in-house counsel or their counsel. They benchmarked 6 districts, so they I think there were 4 in the state and maybe 2 nationally. So it's not recreating the wheel, because pretty much a lot of districts have their policies online. But it's interesting when I asked, there's a lot of policies or a lot of districts that use Neola. We have the list, right? So I'm not exactly sure that I know fully her answer, other than there were a lot of people there were at least 2 others that were interested in taking this deep dive. And they benchmarked off of these 6 districts, and they literally spent 3 years pouring through these policies.
I think we're just at a point, we don't even have some of the policy, so not only would we have to go through them, the policy committee would have to research and come up with a policy. And as you said, it will take us a really long time.
I think that would be a concern that I would have.
or an every other week meeting about policy.
Right.
Like that's what it would turn into.
And we would know early on which are the ones that we're changing and which ones that we're just using the exact form that they're giving us. So I mean, I think, there's going to be a handful of things that are going to be unique to how we want to do it as we get to facility usages and some of those things, how we want to create that document. I can't remember the example that he had, that there was a tailgating one that one school district specifically had. So, but I think as long as we know what are the ones that we're using specifically, that those are the ones that they are warranting, and if there are some that we're changing that verbiage, if we feel it's enough of a risk, we can have that looked at.
One example that he showed of even staff members presenting their own opinion about an issue, and how there was 2 options that they supported. And different districts had chosen one, and different districts had chosen another of when staff members could. So it wasn't just a boilerplate. It was sort of boilerplate, I guess, because you had 2 options that the district chose, and he showed us one district chose one, one district chose another, and both were fine. That would go with that.
And I think I just want to one of the policy does drive everything to a large degree from our seat. And there really is no more important work that the board can do but to get these policies updated and articulated. Governance and strategy is very important for the board as it relates to the efficient and effective running of the district. I guess we could take the approach that we bring Neola in, and it's really just a perfunctory exercise, check the box, yeah, we got that policy, we got that policy. I think we do have to commit ourselves, though, to driving meaningful and philosophical discussions relative to the media policies to ensure that the policies that we're looking to get from them and adopt as a board are what we in administration want the district to be. We don't have to forego those meaningful and philosophical discussions just because Neola is presenting these policies. And I would encourage all of us to have those discussions when the time comes. But I think we're at a point now where we really could use the outside assistance.
Well, and right now we're trying to create the policy and have the meaningful discussions, and that's why we've only been able to have so many
Agreed.
policies completed, because it isn't that the meaningful discussion isn't occurring, it is, and people are doing their homework beforehand and during and then after, but we're also creating the policy. So to have something to start with will allow us to have a meaningful conversation, which can make those changes, which really can move us in a better direction moving forward.
And I thought it was important that she reached out to me, that I reach out and make sure that you all understand that she's expressed these concerns, and we've had an opportunity to talk about it. So, any further discussion? If there is none, I'd entertain a motion that has been put forward by the policy committee to approve the contract with Neola for assisting in the review and development of policy for the Grafton School District.
I will motion to approve the Grafton School District partnering with Neola for their services for our policy.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Steve. Copier and printing leases.
Yes, so our current 5-year lease, which is with Digital Office Solutions, comes to an end this summer. So administration Rick and I met multiple times with a variety, four different providers who basically came in and gave their proposal for a 5-year lease to replace our current copier and printing solution, if you will. After meeting with them, having them reach out to us on multiple occasions as well as calling people who were using these companies, administration has selected Rhyme to be our new provider. Their solution does come with a $40,000 savings. So our lease costs are expected to drop about $40,000 from $110,000 this previous year to $70,000 in the upcoming year. And the solutions that they've brought forward either maintain what we've currently had or actually increase the efficiency of our system. I've included some of the lease papers and what have you. Are there any questions regarding this copier and lease agreement?
So how much of the change is driven by a reduction in the number of copiers? I mean, are we, because I would imagine we have fewer, or are we?
We have one less fewer, so lease payments would decrease. That is a small portion. That would be about $2,000 for the year.
Okay. And does this maintain or improve the service levels? I hear
Yes.
occasionally that
Yeah, and that was, yeah.
challenges at the buildings at times because copiers are out.
Right, and obviously, we're going to start, these are going to be brand new machines. None of them will be put through what, especially that particular copier at GES was put through by being put in a very humid situation. Our buildings are all going to be air conditioned and climate controlled, so we would expect that they would perform better than our old machines.
Any other questions? It's just information only, so no action required. All right, thank you. The baseball and softball fields up.
Yes, and before I do that, I have to apologize. In my original comments, I should have mentioned that the Destination Imagination team, that wasn't supposed to happen. Remember, they came and presented to us and talked. They placed 15th out of approximately 100 teams at global finals. So I saw Bethany Kemper today, very excited. So great for that DI team. They've done some fundraising and done some various things. They came and presented here. So for them to reach 15th out of approximately 100 at globals, really cool. So congratulations to those students and their parents. It was great they came to see us and then to have them do so well. It was at the top of my thing and I missed it. So I want to make sure that I say that because that's a huge accomplishment for them. So great job. Baseball and softball fields update. So we want to reflect back on the things that we've covered so far with this. And so if you'll look at this piece here that says baseball and softball complex master plan site layout sheet, to recall, you can see it up on the screen. That's what we started with, was when we met with Rattler and said, what would it cost for us to bring baseball and softball to the high school? So they came, met with us. They brought, they brought their figures to us. We brought that to the board. And the cost sheet, the baseball and softball field options you look at, it'll say high school location with no turf, was $973,000. So if you recall, we have $800,000 in the budget to look at baseball and softball. So we brought that to the board. The board had said, okay, that's over budget, prices are coming in. Well, can you look at other options? So what can you look at? So then we went back to Rattler and we said, okay, let's look at our current fields at John Long. So the next sheet that you'll see would be, it's site layout concept 1, which is where we use our current baseball field and our current softball field. And with that, what we would look at doing is we would look at adding turf to both the softball and the baseball infields. So we know that as baseball moves to spring, and softball being in the spring, the amount of, practices they have to miss, games they have to miss because of wet weather. This year we had snow, some of those things that can occur. So we looked at what would that cost if we were to add turf at that area. And then you can see that that would be, looking at the baseball and softball field options, that would be concept 1 with turf. It comes in at $608,190. We also asked them to look at, so then what that does is that leaves the baseball field where it is, leaves the softball field where it is, and it leaves the JV softball field alone. It doesn't touch the JV softball field. So, but it doesn't really give a feeling of a plaza, that you could have. So then we asked them, well, what would that look like if we remodeled the varsity softball field? And that's what that site layout concept 2 looks like, where you have a plaza atmosphere here. You could have a scorer's press box that's set up. They could look at both baseball and softball, could announce both of them. It would lend for a common concessions area and so forth. With that occurring, and we added turf. So with turf to the cost of that, you can see that that base bid comes in at $993 with turf. So we're over budget. We met with, when we found the first thing, at the first concept, Jamie Topher and I met with Brian Durst and Ken Hunt and Kevin Moore, so the varsity baseball, varsity softball coaches, as well as the high school athletic director, and reviewed those, took some of that feedback, then came back and we brought these ideas to them. They liked the idea of the turf being added, but both of them were very adamant that they really need 2 fields. So having a varsity softball field and a varsity baseball field, they really need another field for their JV teams to be able to practice on. We talked about what about adding lights, but if you had one team play right away and another team play at night, in the springtime with the cold and so forth, that wasn't something they were really interested in, even though that was part of an alternate bid. So then with that, we look to say, well, then probably concept 2, because that eliminates a JV softball field, would be an issue for us. Because we're trying to stay on budget, we then looked at the site layout concept 1, which leaves the current baseball field where it is, the current softball field where it is, continues to utilize the JV softball field, but doesn't allow us to have a JV baseball field. So then we said, well, what if we were to utilize one of those fields that are at John Long Middle School? So they gave us 2 options to be able to utilize that, which are the first 2 that come with it. And unfortunately, they're both labeled Concept 1 and Concept 2. But we had them look to see what would that look like if we were to use the baseball field that is on the northwest side of John Long. And you can see that if a fence was added, how far that goes out into the common area. So that would create a problem for us to be able to have Fayette utilize that space at all, which they utilize regularly. It would not allow youth football to use that space. It wouldn't allow youth lacrosse to be able to utilize that space either. So it's utilized in a lot of different areas, and it would actually eliminate a Little League field, unless it was T-ball, I believe Topher told me. That T-ball could go there, but if there was a fence there. So the fence idea is, so then we looked at, well, what's the other option? And it's a similar thing if you were to go to the southwest side, and it would eliminate the other Little League field, and it would still create problems for us to be able to utilize that green space. We've asked Rattler to come back with what would it cost to make that infield a grass infield, to make it a JV infield, and get a price point for that to say, okay, if we look at concept 1, which is at $608,190 with turf, if the JV baseball field was to be upgraded over there, then how much more would that fit under our budget of $800,000? and really have both baseball and softball on the same campus. It wouldn't be at the high school, wouldn't be ideal. Listening to the coaches, even if we had varsity baseball and varsity softball, they would want JV baseball and JV softball to be somewhere, and so that would be at John Long. That'd be the only place that we have. We are also, as we're walking through each of these options, we're also thinking long-term about our other athletic needs, not only at the high school, but also in the community. So if we were to continue, once we get the price point back for what would that look like if we were to upgrade the JV baseball field at John Long, the current JV baseball field this fall will be utilized by the football team because they've lost half of their practice field as the construction has moved out into that area. And so they need that green space there, so they're going to be able to utilize that. If we were to move JV baseball off of the high school campus, we would make that a football-only practice field and have them utilize that whole space there for football, right where the JV, you can think of where the JV baseball field is now. That might also be a spot where Gladiators could utilize some of that space. We'll still have those 2 green spaces in the front of the school that either lacrosse could use, youth football could use, our own football team, our own soccer team could utilize when we have when we have multiple teams going at the same time. But we're also trying to keep a long-term vision in mind of are we maximizing all of our green spaces as much as possible without pigeonholing it into one season for a sport that then isn't used again for the rest of the year, or eliminates potential for youth groups to be able to use our various facilities as well. So you can see with the softball field and baseball field options. If you have something you want to add.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had a number of discussions about budget. These were funds, these were projects to be paid for with the use of fund balance. We had earmarked $800,000 for the baseball and softball projects. As the costs began to escalate, and as we found that turf became a more important part of this project, especially with baseball moving to spring, he directed us to take a look at what some of the other options might be to bring costs back into control. And right now, that concept number 1 is the one option that does keep us within that budget area. We're still working with Rettler to get the cost options on how much it would cost to develop a JV baseball field at John Long Middle School, whether that would be within that $800,000 when added to this. We don't know that yet. But obviously concept 2, when you put that turf in, is already up nearly $1 million. So we're kind of bringing it to you tonight, letting you know what meets those expected budgetary dynamics
In the budget, and we're making sure we're keeping you informed of the work that we're doing that you requested us to look at, and I guess to make sure we're getting input from you as we continue to move forward on this. There's been a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of different plans that we've looked at, and we've asked coaches to prioritize, and you're right, turf has come out to be a priority. It's expensive to be able to add that, but it also then allows those fields to be able to utilize and would save us on maintenance costs as well, of not having to put the diamond dry down and being able to have games when we need to have games.
Questions or comments?
So is there a desire of both baseball and softball to have varsity and JV at the same location? Is that what I was gathering?
I don't know if that's a desire. As we look at if we're going to leave the current varsity baseball and varsity softball where it is, then it makes sense to try and have that be a facility that's baseball, softball facility. We don't see spending more money at updating the JV baseball field that then only becomes JV baseball and isn't really utilized in any other way, and takes that green space away from whether it's soccer or football or whatever it may be, that if we were to do the same thing at John Long on a field that currently is there and we just make it nicer, would allow us to have some green space that would go with it long term, we think would be more beneficial for the district. As well as community groups as well.
More beneficial to have what?
More beneficial to have the option of having that be green space that we can utilize in a variety of ways, as we've eliminated green space that currently is athletic fields. And currently, you have one football field that the varsity and JV both use, and they use some of that area where the soccer goal is, but it slopes away. I mean, if that's truly going to become a spot that we're utilizing consistently, then we would have to do some movement of dirt to get it to be in a good spot. It's fine right now. We've laid it out because there aren't any other options. And we're working, Gladiators have come to us talking about, with Kennedy, with the redoing of the walkway, it looks like that won't be a permanent option for them in the future. And so, you have them looking, okay, well, they're looking at John Long. Could they use John Long? Maybe that becomes a permanent site for them. There's a lot of people asking, where do you have green space? And it's like, well, we're trying to maximize our green space so it gives us the most flexibility as possible. Lacrosse is a growing sport, being requested and utilized in a lot of different ways. One of our discussions of private-public partnership is turf. And if we're looking to look at turf at the football field, that doesn't just become football usage, that becomes a lot of sports, FIED, band, a lot of different things can utilize that. But at this point, we don't have that, so we need green space that gives us flexibility and the ability to have multiple teams going at the same time on the same space without wearing it out.
So would you say, barring any financial impediments, the option to put varsity baseball and softball up here, you wouldn't recommend long-term because of using that green space for other things?
I would say that if we were going to look, if the board was willing to look at having the budget be around $1.4 million, then that might be a different discussion, because that's what you'd need to get to. You're already at $973,000 with no turf. You're going to have to add turf, so that's another $219,000. And then you're probably going to need. You still need to make the JV baseball field. You still need a JV baseball field.
9th Avenue.
What's that?
9th Avenue. Where it is now. I mean, where the varsity is now.
Sure. Okay. So now we have. But then what are you going to do with the other softball field? Now we have 2 softball fields that we don't need. Now we have one that we only need one of them.
Right, and I guess those are, yeah.
Right?
So
So we're starting to. So now we're using up a lot of our green space for a baseball, a softball that's really a couple of months out of the year, and then it isn't able to be utilized in other ways without tearing it up.
If you put it here.
Correct. If you put it here. If you leave it at John Long, then it adds another high quality baseball field into the community, because if you're having grass infield at another spot, it adds another big field. There isn't a fence. There wouldn't be a fence that would go with it, but the varsity field would have the fence, but the JV field can still be utilized without a fence, and gives another nice baseball field, and the community doesn't take that away.
have you talked with Little League about their plans long-term for the 9th Avenue fields?
What Little League's long-term plans are for 9th Avenue fields? All of our discussions with Little League have been about their plans for the land that they have out there on River Bend Road, right? And the discussion that they have, and that's been stalled because of parking and not being able to have 2 games at once for the village requirements, and there may be a concern of, is there enough space for them to ever be able to go through with all that? That's my understanding, but I'm not on that Little League board that would go with that.
That's correct.
That is correct, right? That's the rumor that I've heard.
Right.
Okay.
Is there a number on the maintenance savings?
Is there a number on the maintenance savings for the turf? It's a good question. I think we could get one for softball, but baseball hasn't been in the spring yet. See, baseball's been in the summer, so there hasn't been as much of a cost because there aren't as many rainouts in the summer because you have so many different dates to pick from.
Yeah,
We do without turf. We do. Yes, we do.
Because on the surface, I'd prefer to have it right here. It's more expensive. It makes a lot of sense. They're up there.
I think the cost is going to be, I mean, 1.4 million is a significant overage. I mean, we'd gone to the community for a referendum regarding athletic fields, and it was voted down, and that's why the board said, we'll take it out of the referendum and we won't try to fund it. But if we're talking 1.4 million for baseball, softball, we just fixed the soccer field, no turf. They play in the spring as well, right?
Fall and spring.
Fall and spring, with no turf. We just said, we'll fix your drainage and we'll make it safe. And that was our original concern on baseball, was that it was not safe, that there was concerns about the field and everything. But to invest 1.4 million
Well,
for,
if you're asking for our input, mine personally is to go without the turf and put it right here and address the turf later. You can always add turf.
You can, there's savings that go with doing it now because of as you're establishing the drainage and so forth that goes with it, that, is it significant? We could get that number. We have that number, seen it before. But yes, that could be addressed later. The issue will be is that I will say that if whatever we do with baseball, softball, I believe then that their priority list is going to go down because there's other priorities that are needed to be addressed. It'd be hard for me to see us then bringing baseball and softball back up to the table to get turf when we have other needs, whether it's at the football field, whether it's at our auditorium, whether it's at other spaces that we have in our district, or in learning initiatives that we're going to have to be able to do that.
Is it an option at all to use, since spring baseball is an unknown, and if we did something over at John Long, I think I'd agree with you if the long-term plan was to move it on this campus and do something at the high school with football at some point. My view is that all should be viewed, we should look at that together, especially that map of the fields moving here. It's so close to where football is that it seems like the money on turf would be utilized so much more by so many more kids if it was for football, right? Like you said, band, rugby, lacrosse, all those things. But if we put this money into it at John Long to come back in however many years and say, well, now we want to move it to the high school, that seems crazy, right? I mean, is that what you're saying? Like, we're not then going to say, let's dump all this money into John Long, leave this how it is. Now let's look at doing the football field totally separate from that.
Yes, I would say that this has been the priority. So baseball and stuff, we identified, as Carrie said, the community, the board identified soccer, baseball, and softball as being a priority, and we looked at allocating dollars towards that and took that out of this piece. And so it would seem like whatever decision we make is a long-term decision.
I can't help but feel personally that it might make some sense to, maybe I'm way off. I mean, maybe the priorities need to change then. I mean, do we have a JV softball team right now?
We do not. We do not have a JV softball
So,
team.
I mean, it just seems like that's a lot of money for a relatively small number of kids, right? Relative to what, if that money was put into where the football field is, that would affect a huge number of kids, relatively speaking, right? Football alone would be more kids. Football, lacrosse, everything else that could happen on that field versus this. I mean, and we don't know what it's going to be like. An infield tarp is significantly less expensive and less permanent than turf. I don't know that for a fact. I'm willing to bet pretty confidently that we could get a tarp for pretty cheap and say, let's see how that goes. At least take by more time to figure it out before we say, well, there it is, and now we're stuck with that. And this is what we're left with.
I think I would echo that sentiment. At the end of the day, there were athletic fields that were included in the initial referendum that didn't pass. There was a separate question relative to those fields that did pass. I don't even remember specifically whether there was a concept or a rendering of those fields in that referendum.
There was.
Right. But it was only associated with baseball, if memory serves. Baseball, softball, soccer.
The first round?
The first. Yeah.
Soccer was in there, baseball, softball.
Right, but what wasn't contemplated, I don't think appropriately, and I think administration raises a good point, is the green space needs of everyday use, whether it's FIAD or whatever it happens to be, and the impact of that rendering on that green space. And I think it seems to me we should take a longer term view and really develop a more comprehensive plan for all of the athletic spaces and green spaces. Because maybe putting turf on the football field is the best thing that we could do in a comprehensive plan. Because it has the greatest impact on all of these other sports. What would happen with the soccer field? Would it stay, or would they play on, like many other districts do, they play on that field? And could that become football space?
So, yeah, so when people have the space, when you currently have a grass soccer field and then you have a turf football field, they play on the grass whenever they can, and they play on the turf when they can't play on the grass. So you never have a rain out,
Right.
because you'll play on that turf football field, or turf field. Or if you're preparing for state is an E-line, so that's turf. We're fortunate enough that Kevin Moore and Don Arnold have worked with Concordia. We're renting out their space the next 3 games. We're number one seed before we get to the sectional final. And, we have an opportunity to play on turf. So whether it's rain or shine, you're going to be able to play. So that's typically what would happen. It becomes more of an issue in the fall, at the end of the fall, and it's an issue more at the beginning of the spring with the weather. But the field, soccer coaches don't like turf because it's a different ground, it's a different setup, the width of it, and those types of things. We'd have to see what does that. There's more of a. I think turf at the football field is a piece of the long range plan, and the priorities that have been set. The priorities that you've given to us were to look at soccer and address the irrigation problem, the drainage problem, and then look at baseball and softball. And we believe firmly that the next piece in that is turf at the field. We do believe that. If the board were to say we'd like you to rearrange priorities, that's why we're doing a lot of this legwork, making you informed, making the community informed of what we're doing, keeping coaches involved and so forth. And we just need some feedback because we don't believe we can go over budget. We believe that we should stay under budget, and you've allocated $800,000. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what can we do with $800,000? Because if turf is the next step, is the board willing to look at fund balance in a couple of years to throw money at that to partner with other groups that maybe are making donations as well? Right now you've donated $400,000 to each sport, as how it turns out, for soccer, or baseball, or softball, another $400,000. Would that be better spent doing varsity baseball and varsity softball at the high school? Or would that $400,000 be better spent going towards turf and jump-starting that campaign along with other contributions that we may be able to get through our private-public partnership group? So I think it is a comprehensive overview, and as administration, we're trying to, I can't tell you how many times we pull up Google Maps in these meetings and look at an overview of each of our sites and, okay, what could this be, and not just one thing.
But I can't,
looking down the road.
Yeah, but what I can't help but hear is that while I appreciate that you're looking at the priorities that the board has established, that things have changed in your looking at, in your study, and your evaluation. For instance, this notion that if you put the field here, there's not enough green space for some of the other things because it takes that away. I mean, I think Mark's point is right. I mean, what is the plan for the Little League fields? I mean, and I don't know that we shouldn't work on rumors. What is the plan? So the fact that they have they're building these new fields, if they moved everything there, what happens to the green space that we have? Does it stay fields? Who maintains it? Who bears the cost? All of those things. I mean, I don't know that we have a good understanding of that. I don't. I think we need to get that. I don't know what I wouldn't want to do is just establish, well, the priorities were set after the first referendum, that it's got to be soccer, softball, baseball. If there's a better, more comprehensive, long-term grouping of how we should go about doing this. And I wouldn't want to lose sight of that opportunity. And I know it sounds like more work for administration, but I'm troubled with the quotes that come in. When I hear that, well, this option doesn't provide us with the most and the best utilization of our green space.
Well, we would say that concept one does, in all honesty.
Concept one.
You're not creating more work for administration, because administration is doing all this work now.
So concept.
I would feel comfortable saying that.
Can you bring that one up on there?
Yeah,
Concept
we're doing a lot of the legwork. So if you look at John Long, existing locations with turf, is the piece where the varsity baseball field stays where it is. It gets added turf in the infield. And then the varsity softball field stays where it is, and you add turf there as well. You can see where there's an added bullpen, and with the pieces, you can see some of that doesn't include a sound system at this point. It doesn't include irrigation. However, Jamie has said that's not going to be an issue, because we're going to have to run a fire hydrant onto our side, and then we aren't going to have to use, we're going to have irrigation at the soccer field, so we would have the ability to use our current, whatever that's called. Water. Thank you. Yeah, use the current system to be able to keep that field watered. The baseball, softball scoreboards, we aren't upgrading those. That could be something that's come along later. We could do fundraising for that. The teams could do fundraising. They could do naming rights for that. Bleachers, there's currently bleachers there. Could we add more? Yes, we could. What would that, there's a cost that goes with it. The bullpens, hard surface, and so forth. So I think if the board were to say, well, we want you to start researching football and turf, that still doesn't solve our issue that we have with baseball, softball. We're trying to say, you've allocated this much money. Here are some options that we're looking at that would move us forward, that could then move us to the next priority in a comprehensive manner that would solve all of our long-term issues and free up space for the next, sport. 5 years ago, I never heard of lacrosse.
Going back to the one at the high school,
the original drawing at the high school.
With the varsity and
the varsity
at the high school.
Baseball and softball
next to the football
at
field.
the high school. Yeah.
Yep. So it'd be complex master plan site layout.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I get what you're saying. Both, we can change the priorities, right? That doesn't look like a comprehensive plan, because it's baseball and softball, and it's right next to football. That if we were going to do something with football, you can envision that pavilion area between the two, or even a shared press box, concessions, building. They're so close. Mm-hmm. And then they're all here. What happens at John Long then? How much space potentially is freed up at John Long if say that this materialized? What gets freed up at John Long?
One of the JV softball fields.
Okay.
Or the JV softball field. There isn't one of them. There is only one of them.
So that's the one northern.
And that other baseball field would then be used for what?
The other baseball field would be the JV
The
field.
JV.
And the varsity field would become the JV softball field.
Now, do we need, if there was lights and turf there, do we still need the JV?
Yes. They've made that. The coaches have made that very clear. They believe there needs to be two fields.
They prefer that over having lights.
Lights was not even a.
So there'd be more
Wasn't
green
even a
space
wish.
if this, it's obviously more expensive, but there'd be more green space than at John Long than there currently is. Because there'd be that.
There'd be one more JV softball field, but we would say at John Long, we don't need more green space. Why do we need more? We don't need more green space at John Long, because the green space that they currently have, that if you look at
On the west.
the JV baseball master plan site layout or whatever, you can see all of that green space that they currently utilize, which is something that our our Phi-Ed program, Ozaki lacrosse utilizes. Gladiators, I believe, are going to be utilizing it this year for a 1-year trial with that, because you can get enough things on there. Little League uses those two fields. Phi-Ed uses those fields for their curriculum. So there isn't a need for more green space at John Long.
It almost seems like there's I'm newer here, but it almost seems like there's a need for a comprehensive master plan that would include football or lacrosse or whatever that is.
Right. And
Well, once it's moved to John Long, then we're done with that, right? I mean,
No, I agree with you.
we're not coming back
When
saying,
you look at that first master plan concept, the two facilities are too close to one another to not consider them all at once.
So when you say a master plan for football, are you referring just to changing to turf? You're not saying
well, I mean, we
move
already,
the...
yeah, we discussed it at the public-private, right? As I think we even said, there's a need for baseball, softball, potential partnership, one for football. I guess I view it as one for athletics as opposed to two, because it doesn't seem like a great idea to me to just say, well, let's worry about baseball and
Can you
keep
bring
this
up
in the
Google
silo,
Maps and get me over
and
here
then
to high
do
school?
football separately when the plan is to do both.
How
My
does,
feeling is once we do it at John Long, that's it. It's not coming to the high school.
No, I agree with that. I don't like that idea. I think it should be.
Which is maybe not a big deal. I mean, I'm not married to that we have to have it all here, but, which I know has been discussed.
So Jeff, just for clarification, concept one, the current one. So it's taking the varsity baseball field and the varsity softball field, and it's putting turf on those and making those varsity fields. And then the JVs still play at the JV field, and then they utilize the field up here without the fence.
Potentially, or to look at moving JV baseball to John Long and having that become a grass infield, having that become a JV, so then baseball and softball are held on that campus.
Okay.
So varsity baseball, varsity softball, JV baseball, JV softball are all housed on that campus. It becomes one area, so we then have a storage area for them to house their stuff that goes with it, and that becomes the complex for that.
So that's utilizing enough, so it's nothing at the high school for
So then we would say,
JV at
so
that.
correct. So then what we would say is, and I apologize for having a broken foot, it's gotten in the way of a lot of things lately. But what we would say is that looking at this area here, and I think they won't see.
That's fine, that's fine.
So what we're saying is then this area here, this slopes away quite a bit here, but then this area here would become a green space that we would look to utilize for whether it is football, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's looking at gladiators utilizing that space as well. But there'd be enough space here to have multiple, not necessarily full fields or the length of fields, but you'd be able to have the JV and varsity teams able to practice at the same time and utilize those fields in a wide area. Because right now we've lost it to about right there. Is what we've lost there. And currently soccer, varsity and JV both utilize that field up there. So if we were able to move away from this area having to be used for football, it would give soccer also more practice areas to be able to have both of their teams practicing. Whereas right now, varsity and JV are both using the same field for football, varsity and JV are both using the same field for soccer, and you can't really go on this field except for games because otherwise the field gets run down and worn down. So if we were to utilize this space and then turn this over to soccer space, turn this over to football space, then that, down here we're going to have two areas of green grass as well. Then that becomes another area, but it's farther away from all of our locker areas, but it might be a place for whether it's lacrosse, whether it's whatever it may be, any other sport, a club, just reading the paper on Sunday about Ultimate Frisbee Championship at the college level. So we have Ultimate Frisbee kids with green space playing something. So it could be a club at the high school that's doing something that would go with it. So that, we believe that gives us more flexibility for more sports coming forward, more students being involved in other things than locking in. The price doesn't help us, the cost doesn't help us, and it caused us to look at more of a global view of this whole thing. Because if they're saying we still need a JV baseball and we still need a JV softball field, well then that has to be at the middle school. That has to be at the middle school. Then we have an extra softball field that we don't need. We don't need that. And then this area, now we're stuck with football's going to utilize half a football field, soccer's going to utilize a full soccer field, and these areas down here are going to have to become practice areas for those varsity sports. Because that's all the green space we have.
So which of the options in dollars cover what you just described?
Option one
So that keeps everything the same except moves the JV to
Concept one.
Fifth Avenue.
Gives us,
So concept one will have a JV softball and baseball field at the John Long
It
campus.
does not include the JV baseball.
That's what you're
They're
looking at
still
bid
working
also.
on what it would cost to develop one of those existing softball fields to the south of Woodview and the west of John Long into a JV baseball field, one that wouldn't have an outfield fence so that it could still be used
Correct.
for Fayette and other groups.
and not take away the Little League field.
Right.
Or even like Fayette could utilize it. Our Fayette program could utilize it because it'd be too small for that. Couldn't even do kickball there.
So as I kind of just try to parse this in broad scale,
Yeah, I apologize, I'm obviously not being very clear in my own mind.
right, but there's an option.
There's a
that-
lot of pieces
right.
moving.
There's an
area.
option that turns the John Long campus into a baseball softball
Correct.
Yes.
location, and the high school location, football, soccer, and all others, right?
Correct.
And then there's an option that says, no, all varsity sports should be on the high school campus. But doesn't even address where the JV portions of that would be, right? They would by default end up at John Long?
They would, they'd have to. And it doesn't address, even if we didn't go with turf, let's say we bought a tarp. So maybe it's 25 grand for a tarp. We're at $1 million. So we're $200,000 over with none of we still don't have the scorer's booth or the Mason dugouts or the sound system or, all those pieces.
So the only thing that we don't know then at this point, so when I look at number 3, the high school location, no turf. That's to build the 2 fields up here on campus, but that's putting $0 into anything in John Long. There's no doubt, there's
That's
nothing
correct.
out there. So the same thing with concept 1, that's to do 3 of the 4 fields. We just don't know about what the cost is to do a little bit more of a plain JV baseball field.
Yep. Improve the backstop, improve the infield.
But the turf on concept 1 is only on 2 of the fields.
That's correct. It's on the varsity fields. Yep. The turf would be on the varsity
think
fields.
would be-
Varsity softball and varsity baseball.
So, in summer, are there any, because historically the boys have had a freshman team as well, will schools not be offering to freshman teams, or they'll only be down to 2 teams?
They would
Because-
utilize the 2 fields.
The 2 fields, but they
Yep.
could have up to 3 teams.
Yeah, get up to 3 teams, because we said, and that's what they were saying, that's what Brian was using as an example. He's like, this year we have 3 teams. We're gonna have 3 teams this year. Like,
Right.
if we had 1 field, like, we can't do that. That's where it was like, well,
3 baseball
1 field, yeah. He's like, 1 field just doesn't, like, service us in the way that we need. We need at least 2 fields.
And then do we know, obviously lights is another item on here, I don't think that has to be done first, but do we know if the village would have any issues with us putting additional lights up here or putting lights over at John Long? Is that a question that we would have to ask?
We have not, just because of the price tag being 400 grand.
Okay.
We have not looked into that.
I just didn't know in the future, if they would never say, as we look at a long-term plan, if they would say, nope, I don't think.
I know lead eaters have talked about approaching the village about utilizing John, because they're gonna have to utilize John Long this year in that space, about being able to put up temporary lights. I don't know where that conversation went. That was the last time we met with them. They brought that forward. They're new generators, and that'd be a temporary thing, and then they might pull residents after that. Was it bad, good?
I would think it'd be a lot easier to put lights up here because they already exist
And then down there, that way.
than down there. And that was broached years ago to put them over at night then.
With spring baseball and spring softball, no one would like the idea of lights and playing a 7 o'clock game. I can tell you that. Spring baseball at 7 o'clock is going to be way different than summer baseball at 7 o'clock. That's directly from the coach's mouth. It's like very adamant. Like we went into the meeting with a different idea than what we left with. I'll say that. Like that was just like, that wasn't even, why did you even get an alternate bid sort of discussion.
So it seems to me, from a directional perspective, either we have the development of a John Long campus for baseball and softball, varsity and JV, right? And we don't have the numbers for that.
No, we do not have a final number. We know that.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so that's one option, right? And then, which by default leaves high school, all other sports as currently configured here. The other option would be in the baseball and softball varsity fields being moved to the high school campus. And does one of these options cover that
973,
cost?
973, 665 would get us the high school location with no turf,
With no turf.
That's
But now you would have to add the turf.
which is $219,000.
Would you not have to add the dugouts?
You don't have to.
We don't have to.
Currently have them,
Yeah.
but you don't have to.
Right.
You can do
And-
fence dugouts, they could add that later.
But it seems like you're saying that's really not a good option regardless of cost to have it all here.
I think looking at it
Less
from a
options.
global perspective, at our limited green space,
Which
I would
is
say
fine.
yes. I think I've come to that conclusion after all the work and energy that we put into it, of thinking this is a great idea. This would be great to have all the varsity sports here. And I still think it would be great to have all the varsity sports here if we owned,
Yeah.
Columbia
More
St.
like-
Mary's.
I mean, in my
And,
because we
fitness,
just spent
like
the
that
money on
land.
soccer, that, right, I mean, if the next thing up is gonna be football.
I wouldn't even say it's football. So, because
Yeah,
I
know
think that's a
that-
little narrow.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that.
You know what I mean? Because I think
Which
you
is
said
why I
that
think
too.
that's
I
more
think it's just, I think
cost.
the turf, I think turf is probably more the discussion. Because I do think it opens up, whether it is soccer practicing on it when it's wet, whether it's football practicing on it, whether it's being able to host a tournament because someone else couldn't host a tournament. I mean, we're going to Concordia because we don't have a field. That happens at various times when it gets wet. It opens up other opportunities, hosting youth events that go with it. But that's a price tag. That's over $1 million. We know that. We don't know the hard number. We know what's over $1 million.
My concern is doing all these piecemeal. Do soccer, do softball, do that. And I know that this was what was discussed and that,
Well, I think we want to wait for football because we just did the track. So we just put some money
We bought
into it.
ourselves 5 years.
5 years.
We have a 5-year window to, thus the establishment of the subcommittee, to look at fundraising and give us time to be able to do that.
But I think it is pertinent to have the discussion in a limited sense to make sure that we're best utilizing the green space. And I think when it
Because
comes
in the short term, we have to utilize
Yes.
that, because once we go in a certain direction, and we can't get more green space. That's the issue, is we can't get more.
well, and I view it as we also can't move it to the high school. I mean, I agree, the green space thing to me makes a lot of sense. It's gonna be John Long, there's no viable public-private option to say, here's our master plan, we needed $2 million to move everything to the high school. I thought you just did this at Ninth Avenue. That's,
No.
if we look at soccer, which, and again, I wasn't around for that, but it sounds like they wanted it to be grass instead of turf.
That's
I
right.
mean, so we spend that for soccer, and we still have the green space.
And we intentionally worked with Hoffman, Rettler, and Copier to try and create as much green space as possible with our parking. If you remember that going back months ago, like we tried to create green space because we realized that we were running out of green space. So even when they were developing the parking lots, they're saying like, how can we get us some green space that we can utilize for practice fields, for something to be able to have grass.
But just as we bring this back to some type of closure, or not closure, but next steps, to me, it would seem like, at least I would like to see, what is the all-in cost for that John Long campus of varsity and JV baseball and softball, right?
And we've requested that, we still don't have it yet, but
And
yes.
the way the coaches would like it configured.
Yep.
I would also ask for that same, if we were going to move the varsity softball and baseball to the high school complex, let's get an understanding of that all-in cost. And I know we say, well, we could put up fence dugouts, but what is it, if we were going to make that the surface and atmosphere that we all envision, what would that cost be? And I think it's important because that is, in essence, the representation of sorts that was made at the Facilities Advisory Committee. That those things were being moved up here. And I know the past president sitting in this seat has expressed his desire that that's the way it be. But that based upon less information. And I think this has been good work and good information has come out as to why that may not be the best option. But I think it would be advisable to have that cost, the way they would envision it and they'd like to see it. Isn't it?
So, and I guess, so in my mind, that's what this high school location no turf is. It just really depends on what more you believe you want to have in there.
Well, we'd want to have, because I think the option that we're going to develop for the John Long campus is turf for the softball and turf for the
So we can, so
baseball.
then it's really just for us to take 973 plus 219, so we can do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, because those are alternate
Agreed.
bids that we sort of, okay, so we
But-
can do that. You
and
say
pull that
apples
together.
to apples.
Yes.
This is what it is.
Right.
And, because by then, Rattler will have gotten back to us with the JV
Right.
cost of creating a nice JV field, so they aren't playing on a dirt infield for JV. That was a concern that Brian had. He's like, well, we can't get this, I need a grass infield. Okay, well, within our budget, unless softball and baseball have $100,000 in their activity account or $200,000 in their activity account, like, this is the amount of money that we have right now to fix this solution,
And you
fix
got
this issue.
bidding from other companies as well?
Yep, so Rattler would take it out to bid. This is what their estimate is on what each of these concepts would be. And they've been pretty
But
good
are
on
you
this.
only dealing with Rutland?
They're
Are there other
the,
companies that can competitively bid up against, and maybe the customer?
so Rattler isn't completing any of this work. They're the site
General
manager,
contractor.
general contractor, thank you, the general contractor, putting it out to bid. So, like, when we did the soccer field, there was, like 4 bids for the excavating piece and 4 bids for
So they're
irrigation.
generally looking for a subcontractor.
Yeah, it's not them doing the work themselves. Yeah, good question. It's really them or what's the other one, not starting point, but point of beginning. Rattler and Point of Beginning are the 2 across the state that do this, a lot of this work.
And this fence here is what screws up our rubber goods. Is that my understanding that right? Once you fence this in,
Yeah.
you can't set
Yeah,
a gym class out over it.
Yeah,
It's a big
it's
fence
correct.
there.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah, that's correct. Yep, that's correct.
So the only, I would, just in the high school one, that would take into some consideration, I don't know if we have it from the past, of what dollars we would have to put into the 2 fields at Ninth Avenue then.
What? Setting?
What we would have to put in for the 2 fields at Ninth Avenue to make those JV fields, or are they just okay as is?
So they would say that they would be okay as is, because the varsity baseball field drains really well right now.
Okay.
And we wouldn't be turning that into turf no matter what. That's not part of the equation.
Okay.
And Ken likes the varsity softball field currently.
So we're
It
good
wasn't
there.
turned into turf, so they would just be, they'd be left alone in that way. There may be a cost of bringing the fire hydrant over, but
And then I guess my only other question would be, obviously with it being spring next year, so what is really our timeline to have any, I mean, I'm assuming there's nothing that we can decide at this point yet that's going to give us anything for this coming spring or next spring,
yes,
or
no matter what we do, someone's going to lose a season.
okay.
So whether that's everyone's at the JV field playing for a year while we do the John Long field, whether that's everyone's at the John Long field while we redo the high school fields, we're not going to be able to get everything done in one season. Is that right? That's accurate. So at some point you're going to have double duty on someone's field.
So we'd almost kind of to understand kind of what that timeline is, that we missed just that one season, but it gave ourselves enough.
Right, but
Yeah,
I
so
think first we gotta
Yep.
pick between the 2 options.
Agreed.
Understand the costs, and
Agreed.
then it's a matter of.
But we can lay out,
Yep.
they can give us a timeline. We can give a timeline, Carrie, if you can add that to the list of things that we can give. Sure. We can get that for you.
And I guess that timeline would then be dependent upon
Yeah.
a decision matrix.
Decision being made, yeah, the budget.
if we did this, exactly.
And
So
and
this-
some of that, I mean, like, at one point we thought end of August, early September, the soccer field was gonna be ready, and then it snowed, and then it rained, and then it was sun, and it was rain, like, so that's been delayed out there. I mean, so some of it, even with their best timing of knowing when they're gonna do various things, it does depend on what the elements give us. And then now it's gonna depend on, what the summer is like. If it rains for a day, and then it's sunny for 4 days, and then it rains again, and it just keeps doing that, the field's gonna grow like crazy. If it's dry, that'll be a problem for us. So we can get you that number.
So,
See Bob Raven's going.
yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Well, a couple questions. Will we ever see spring in Wisconsin again after this year? The other thing is, the elephant in the room is $400,000 for lights. Why, you can't convince me as a taxpayer you need $400,000 for lights for softball and baseball. You just can't. Take the $400K out of there and you're darn close to where you want to be. put it over at Ninth Avenue where he uses the space correctly and go for it. But actually, you have to sell this to the whole public, that this isn't just the Cadillac stuff on top of this building. And that's where I was a couple months ago, and I'm still there until this thing is done and done well and completed. You've got the public out there, and if it doesn't end well, you're not going to see another women referendum for a long time. So that's just where I'm at with it. The other thing is none of my children develop any real athletic skills thanks to their father and mother. We spend an awful lot of money on athletics for a handful or a small percentage of the students. Our core mission is to educate the average student and get him to advance as far as possible. $400,000 in the C1 tiles improvements in the classroom would go a heck of a long way. So that's where I'm on this whole thing.
Thank you. So we have two options that we'll take a look at. You'll develop those costs. The homework for the board would be based upon all the discussion that we heard tonight. If you see another alternative, that is a better utilization, then let's hear it. Then let's hear it quick.
Yeah, if you have other ideas, feel free to reach out to me. But we will, it gives us, that we have discussion, because then it gives us direction, bringing things forward and heading in the right direction.
So these two options, utilization of the John Long campus for baseball and softball, varsity and JV. Option one, and option two is utilize the high school campus for varsity and the John Long campus for JV baseball and softball. All right, thank you. Contract for CESA services for 18-19.
Yeah, so every year we need to have the board approve the various services that we utilize with CESA. So you'll see that the contract summary sheet that we utilize with them, some of it being a basic membership, being part of the District Assessment Coordinators Network. There's a fee that goes with that. That's the DAC. That's where we find out about different assessments. We find out the update that, you know, the growth model is coming in for the report card at the high school in 2 years. Things of that nature that are very valuable. School Improvement Services Network, Diana is involved with that. Other teaching and learning directors in that way. And then you get into things that we allocate with them. Well, the institutional membership is part of it, but then the educational audiologist, that's based on student need. So we don't have the need to hire a full-time person. It's hard to hire a part-time person, so we contract with CESA 1. So that's the teacher of the blind and visually impaired. We actually have a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. Distinguished Scholar at Academy is students who with autism. It's a special academy for them. And then our Ozark Community High School is students that are at risk of not graduating, credit recovery, the seats that we have there. So these are all things that we've worked with. Mary Pat Seward had looked at it as our Director of Pupil Services. Diana looked at it as teaching and learning, working with the high school to make sure these are the things that we need, and we just need the board to have questions or when those are answered, then to be able to approve the contract with CESA.
Any questions, comments? This is comparable to the past. I want to say around 113.
Yep, we run around the same thing. It just depends on student need is what it depends on.
Okay, then I'd entertain a motion to approve and adopt the contract as presented.
I'll make that.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Nutrition services update. An overview and fees.
What I wanted to just kind of give you some ideas with the new kitchens, some of the things that we're going to change as far as for food service. And so gives us the opportunity to change a few things here.
And I'm sorry, Linda Binder, right?
Oh, yes,
So
sorry.
You didn't say Linda's name, she jumped up and got right in there. But thank you very much for enduring the heat and for staying to this part of the agenda.
Well, we're used to it in the kitchens right now. Okay, so basically, a few things. We're doing the 3 kitchens are being overdone. All 3, the 2 elementaries and at the high school. At the elementaries, some of the things that you're going to see. What I worked with the architect as far as we're going to do 2 lines, 2 serving lines at our elementary level. so that we can hopefully get kids through faster. Right now, at the elementary levels, there is only one, they go line up and they go through one line. So we are going to be two, I believe the principals are going to then have two classes coming at the same time and try to get the kids through faster and so forth. Obviously, we're going to have more kids at each school also, but this will help. One of the other things we're going to offer is a cold sandwich as a second entree. One of the things you'll see is that we have some different equipment, and so we'll have some opportunity to keep more items at each of the school sites too. Students will be doing more self-service on fruits and vegetables. So they're going to be doing, where they're coming through, they're going to be served their hot entrees and that, and then they're going to actually do more self-service. We're going to be portioning that and having, trying to work with them to say, you need to select one or two items and so forth, rather than right now we're serving them and asking them, do you want this or this, and then hopefully it'll be a little faster by they'll just take what they want. Students from 5K on will be inputting a 4-digit PIN number on a keypad versus using lunch cards. There's a couple of reasons for that. The principals, actually we know a lot of elementary schools that do that. Right now we start that at the middle school and high school. But what we would like to do, we're going to be doing is at the elementary level, we're going to teach them from kindergarten on, how to put 4 digits in so that they don't have to come down with their cards. They lose their cards and, there's all kinds of commotion that way. So they will be, it'll be a little slow at first, I'm sure. But we have worked with other schools or heard from other schools that it does work, very well. So in order to implement that too, Rick and I are going to be we'll be planning to have something at registration, kind of showing them what the keyboard or keypad will look like. At the open house, we'll plan to be there so that kids can come down and practice. At the soft beginnings, if we can work it out, we'll have teachers send them down to the kitchen and that so that they can kind of see it before the start of school and so forth. So, and then we're also going to be sending them out a practice, an image of the keyboard so that they can practice at home too ahead of time. So I think that's what we're planning to kind of do. So anyways, so that's some of the things that you're going to see changes at the elementary levels. The other thing that you'll see is that at the elementary level, we're going to be, I put in some new types of equipment to enhance the quality of food. One of the things is instant hot water dispensers at all of the school locations so that they can make things like pasta and so forth right there. Right now we have a hard time shipping that out, making it and shipping it and so forth. So there'll be some more capabilities on the schools, at each school site, of a little more variety on the menu and so forth. The microwave steamers at my elementaries too. Right now, again, we cook our vegetables at our main production kitchen and ship those out. Well, you can know by the time it gets served and so forth, it's held at temperature, but it's been kind of cooking a lot longer. So this will be, there'll be better quality food, I believe, at the sites once my staff learns how to use the new equipment and so forth. But that is some of the things that you'll see at the elementary levels. At the big change will be that Grafton High School will be now our new production kitchen. That's where all our deliveries come in. We have large walk-in freezer coolers and so forth. The office will be there. Then that's where we then satellite other foods. We get all our deliveries basically into one, so we satellite our foods and supplies out to the other kitchens from that based on the numbers that come in. One thing though that will be nice, as each of the elementary schools in that too will have freezer, just a one-door freezer, so they'll also have some backup food there because that's another concern is sometimes if you run out of food or something like that, by the time we get it over from the main kitchen and so forth. So there'll be a little more capabilities of some of the problems that we may have had in the past. But the main production will still be at the high school level. That's where we would do our salads and all of those types of things, so fresh fruits and vegetables and so forth. The high school, the cafeteria, was a big change. We're experimenting it a little bit with our interim food service this year, but it's going to be more of a scramble system. In other words, kids will come in, they'll go to various stations that of what they're interested in, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Then they go to, again, all of it is still under the USDA reimbursable lunches and so forth. We're still under that program. So one of the things that still is a priority or whatever is that they have to take a half a cup of a fruit or vegetable in order to make it a reimbursable lunch. So what we're doing is we are having 2 large cold wells or garden bars in the center. So as the kids take their entrees and so forth, and then they'll go into the center, grab fruits or vegetables, and then exit out through cashier stations. And what we're trying to do without adding staff in that too is that we're trying to go down to just basically 2 cashier stations with 4 lines, which is down from what we were before, but we're going to touch screen, so try to keep it a little faster that way. And with the kids, kind of a scramble system, there shouldn't be where they're lining up as much and so forth. And this kind of basically it's going to be then a food court atmosphere. They're going to use fast food trays versus the sectioned off lunch trays, so it's going to be a little bit more. So we're going to have items that are packaged and kind of easier to grab and so forth. This kind of shows you, this is like a week ago or something. I tried to get as most recent I could as some of the pictures. But this would be like entering in. On the right-hand side there, that kind of shows you, we've got it, it's not going to be all squared off where, so the concept will be there, they'll kind of come in and they'll see different areas and so forth. So it's a little bit more, like I said, like a food court atmosphere. The stations then that they'll have, that they'll see is self-serve pizza station, a hot food or comfort food station, which would be, sometimes we'll have like our traditional lunch there, like say chicken nuggets, mashed potatoes, that type of thing. Or we'll make it into like a pasta bar, potato bar, or something like that, so that'll be a hot food. We are putting in a sandwich bar where we're going to make it kind of like the Subway type sandwiches, where we'll have somewhere where the kids will come up, they'll have different options of breads or bread items, and then different items to go on that to make a sandwich bar. There's grab and go hot sandwiches, like the big one is the hot and spicy chicken patty. We basically have that out every day, and there's a ton of kids that still take that. And then we have pre-made entree salads and so forth and that. So that'll kind of give you an idea of some of the different choices that they'll have. Then they also have self-serve food and beverage merchandisers, and these are just what we were using now in the interim. And this will be then also utilized inside the cafeteria. There will be a beverage one. There's one where they have pre-made salads and that they can just grab and go. And then the third one will be a la carte items like parfaits, yogurt parfaits, different things like that, fresh fruits and so forth. Let's see. And then above the stations, and you can kind of see the little boxes up above, and that's where we'll have a TV screen, that'll kind of tell them what's here that day, and eventually, would show nutrition information and so forth. And then that would also indicate to them that we have to somehow put on there that then proceed to fruits and vegetables to make it a meal. Because right now, where the fruit and vegetable bars are, there's not really a way to put a TV over there that everyone could see and so forth. So we're going to have a message on each of those areas. Let's see. And then this is basically right now too, we were doing the fruit and vegetable. Students, like I said, would be instructed that they have to go to the center, grab, and so forth. So in that area too, we do have where they can have a salad with different toppings and so forth. And that's the kids go through a lot of fruits and vegetables that actually by having it where they can self-serve themselves. Behind the scenes, we're going to have different types of equipment also that will give us some different possibilities of some new menu items. On the left there, is a tilting braising pan, so that allows us to do grilling and all kinds of things in it, the roasting and so forth. The other kettle there is like a big soup kettle and so forth, which is what we were utilizing down in for Chili Day. They're using both of those because that's the other thing is that right now our big kettle, but the capacity is over and above what we can do for Chili Day, so we're still set for that. This shows another. They're slowly getting equipment in, so it's kind of like this on the left-hand side is like a double stack combination. It's a combi oven, which is a combination oven and steamer, and then basically all the work tables and so forth like that are going in too. So, and there's still more equipment coming. So any questions on any of that type of stuff, or what's new with the kitchens, or on that? Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up, we were talking about, just to kind of make you aware too, in January, we do what's called direct certification. We get downloaded from the state, people that are in different programs and so forth, which would qualify for free and reduced, along with when people fill out free and reduced applications. But now in January, USDA began matching the direct certification with Medicaid data. So that increased, actually, the state, I think they said they had over 100,000 kids that now qualified for free and reduced because of this matching with Medicaid. For us, I just showed you what we were in December. We were 11% free, 3% reduced, so 14% of our enrollment, or 285 kids, qualified for free and reduced. In April now, with the additional matching, we have 14% free students, reduced students are 4%, and that gives us 18% of our enrollment, or 357 students now qualify for free or reduced lunch, or I should say meals, so breakfast or lunch. And that's an additional 72 students. The other, I'll go into lunch prices. That's another change that came, but I just wanted to just mention here too. Just pulled this quote: "The key to life is accepting challenges. Once someone stops doing this, he's dead." And I just wanted to, kind of acknowledge my staff too, because they had a lot of challenges this year with not having a kitchen at the high school and not having a ramp to bring the food up and so forth. So we managed, and hopefully the new kitchens, we'll get through that too once they are up and going. So the other thing, so that's it on that. And then I did have in your packet on the lunch prices for next year. Basically, what happened in the past, for those of you that remember, we had, for probably the past, I think it's 6 or 7 years, we had to do what was called paid lunch equity. It was a requirement that if you weren't at that average, you had to increase lunch prices. This year, they came out, USDA came out that said that if you, only schools that had a negative balance in their food lunch account as of January 31st were required to do the paid lunch equity. So we ran our numbers and basically qualified for an exemption. Now it says we calculated our balance was over 100,000, just so you know, it's probably not going to be there or anything like that, which we thought was kind of strange because they used the January numbers, which is, there's a lot of things that happen after that time that bring your balance down, but at least, that they were obviously going for one set point. So, but anyhow, we did qualify to keep our lunch prices at the same level if we wanted to. So I guess because of over the last, probably 5 years, we have been raising lunch prices. And I think I don't want, with the referendum and that too, that people say that we're going to, trying to pay for our kitchens with increase in lunch prices. That's why I'm recommending then that this year we remain the same or this next year, that we remain the same as this year. And I've got those prices listed on the bottom, that our elementary is at $2.45, our middle school lunch price is $2.60, high school lunches are at $2.75, and then the same reduced prices always remain the same at $40. 30 cents for our reduced price breakfast, which we were going to do this, I should say, I'll back up too on that. We had actually kind of figured that we were going to be able to do that for high school this year, but then when we were asked to, we never did go into that. One of the things that they would like to do for next year too is that we offer, it's kind of similar to what our middle school breakfast is for the high schoolers, that we keep our cafeteria or the open area so that when students could come in during the early morning and so forth. So we are talking about doing that for the high school this next year, but we have to get, because we're not closed off and we're not manned, we're trying to get a ringer or some type of a system that as, if we leave the door open, that if a student walks in during that time where no one's out front, that we can see that. So, but anyway, so we are planning to offer some type of a breakfast even during their early morning study halls and stuff like that. They are going to have in there that we would have that available for them. And then basically the other prices, milk price is staying at 35 cents and our staff pricing is staying at $3.50. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the 2018-19 school year food service fees, those remaining the same with the 17-18 school year prices.
So moved.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Linda, thank you very much to you and to your staff for enduring the changes. I sense some excitement in there relative to new equipment and perhaps an enhancement in the production kitchen, and we look forward to you and your staff continuing to bring good things to the kids, so thank you. Okay, construction update, Jeff.
Yes, so working with Jamie on this, we don't have any pictures that we're going to show right now. The June meeting will be a time for us to devote time to showcase all the different changes that have occurred. In the last 3 weeks, our focus has really been on ending school and then the moving piece. So earlier we'd hired Coakley Brothers, we had multiple companies come in, hired Coakley Brothers to work with them. They started attending our weekly Friday site meetings, making sure that we have all of our resources allocated, timelines in place, because of the tight timeline that we have for needing to be able to have the construction crews be able to hit the ground running. So, I think I can't remember ever ending a year and then like getting more busy. but that's what's happening right now, as we're becoming busier, like as we move forward. And through this week, staff have really done a great job, I think, of ending the year on a positive note, working with students, and maybe even having sadness themselves if we've had building closings or they're moving to another building, students themselves, but have really just been the consummate professionals for us. The work that our custodial crew has done, the technology crew, Linda mentions food service, like everybody doing more at the end of the year to end on a positive note so that we can be ready for this week. So today, because of needing, with having Coakley trying to space out when people are moving, and the middle school being not really having to move at all. So the middle school today had a professional development day. The high school, at first we'd had them doing something different today and moving on Wednesday and Thursday, but because of being able to use Coakley, we had the high school today moving their stuff. I mentioned earlier Ryan Brogelman coming in and having holes in his wall. I went up today with Scott on the second floor at the end of the day, and a lot of those science rooms have already been cleared out. They've started looking for pipes. They've removed a window up there. That's why you'll see the dumpsters out there. They've already started clearing out some of the stuff that we aren't reutilizing. You'll go up there, you'll see the glass science cabinets that will say keep, because we're still utilizing those. Other cabinets that are being tossed as you have flexible furniture coming in there for them to be able to use the science tables in a different way. But so today at the high school, it was high school teachers coming together and helping each other pack and move things into spaces. So we worked with Hoffman to say, is there a safe spot in a room that they aren't doing anything, so you can store stuff in that room. We don't have to pay for a storage trailer. We can immediately move it to that area. There's a math classroom upstairs that you go in there and you can see there's a row to walk down, but it's full of stuff. Jamie has worked with Faith Technologies to come in and put the new LED lights in. So the lighting's done in there, which is occurring across the whole district, but then you can store it in there, so it saves us money on moving stuff, as well as having to pay someone else to store it in a container for 3 months, and offset costs in that way. So the high school today was focused on that. At the elementary level, if you were a classroom teacher, that's where they had the option of either choosing Bridges training for the day or choosing Bridges training in August. And all but 2 teachers chose Bridges training today. So if you were a kindergarten through 5th grade teacher, you were probably in Bridges training. If you were a specials or a different area, then you had that extra time to pack some stuff. But tomorrow then is the day that John Long Middle School, their staff have been split up into 3 different groups. So a third of the teachers will go to GES, a third of the teachers will go to Kennedy, and a third of the teachers will go to Woodview. And those teachers at the elementary schools have said, I want help to pack my stuff. So those teachers are helping pack at each of those levels, getting it ready. At the high school, if science is done in a certain room, then other people are moving to help them. Social studies, math, English, all those areas, they're all coming together as a community to try and help and get everyone ready for that. So that will occur tomorrow. Technology has been working so this weekend they had to do the sound for graduation. If you weren't doing sound for graduation, you were in the high school or you were in GES.
Kennedy and Woodview taking down smart boards.
Kennedy and Woodview. Okay, Kennedy and Woodview taking down smart boards. You can go into the high school now and you'll see plastic covering the smart boards, projectors taken out of the ceilings. So all those pieces have to come to fruition before we can get ready for abatement. So that's going on at the same time. On Thursday, so that's Wednesday. So Wednesday is really the packing day, finishing moving at the high school, packing at the elementary schools. Thursday is moving day for the elementary schools. John Long will again have PD. They're looking at their schedule. They're looking at the various pieces that go with that for next year. The high school, then that's when they'll have their faculty meeting. That's when they'll have their end of year celebration. They'll be done moving and so forth. But on Thursday will be moving day at the elementary schools where Coakley is coming in. We've said to teachers, we aren't paying you to move. We don't expect you to hurt yourself moving things. We're having them move the heavy desks, having them do all those things. If someone feels comfortable pushing a cart out to the outside and then Coakley putting it up the ramp and into the truck, and that's great. Moving a box, whatever it may be, everyone doing their part. Some people will be helping technology box up some things. So we make very clear we appreciate our staff and we pay them to teach. Them helping us is saving us money, but we don't want someone to get hurt at all at the end of the year here. But everyone working together on that Thursday. So Thursday is when everyone will be coming together, moving all their stuff. Abatement starts on Friday at GHS, on Monday at Kennedy and Woodview. So there is a little bit of time built in for if If they aren't able to get everything moved out of Woodview and Kennedy, that they'll come back in on Friday and do that, because that has to be out. So on Monday, abatement occurs in that way. And then Monday night, the 4th, is when we have our GES celebration, the farewell celebration that will occur from 5 to 8. On Tuesday, the fire department will be coming into GES and they'll be doing some training in GES. So it's an opportunity for us to utilize our building in a way that they don't have an opportunity to do. They want to lock into a room, lock a room, have to knock a door down. They want to be able to be in a room and try and knock through a brick wall to get through to save someone. They want to bring hoses in and start a fire, put a fire out. Do some things that you wouldn't be able to do. They don't have an opportunity to really real-time train in that way. And so here's an opportunity for the building that is going to be demolished to be able to really get some training in that will then help them in the future if there's a real fire, if there's a real emergency, being able to navigate with that. So they're working on that. Starting on that 2nd, they'll be working with Gary and Jamie with the abatement schedule. So they'll be able to get as much training as they can in place as we look at doing abatement at GES in that way. And then last but not least, Topher is finalizing our School Safety Initiative grant. That's from the Office of Student Safety through the Department of Justice. Some recent information that's come out has said it's going to be a maximum of $20,000 per building. Is what they've set as the grant information. It's due by June 8th. We're working with Chief Johnson as well as Chief Wenton to get letters of recommendation, letters of support from them. But otherwise, we are close. It's not due till the 8th, and we're close to having it finished this week and be able to get that grant in to upgrade some of our security features that were not included in the referendum. Some of the things that were included in the referendum are looking at having door contacts at each of our exterior doors, so that if a door is propped open for longer than a set amount of time, we can say 30 seconds, we can say a minute, we can say 2 minutes, whatever it may be, that if it's propped open, it immediately sends an email or a text message to whoever we want to be on that list. It could be the principal, it could be Jamie, it could be myself, it could be our police liaison officer, it could be at different times. We can set it up so it goes to different people. So we have some things that are built in through the referendum, through our construction projects, adding security cameras. Linda talks a little about in the cafeteria area, that wide open space, there's security cameras that are in that space. So there, the hope would be a deterrent for students to be able to try and come in and grab some of that open area stuff. But there's other pieces that we wanted to move forward with that grant that we are applying for as well. So sort of the focus right now, Jamie's had his crew, he had high school kids in today moving things. They're really taking on moving a lot of the stuff at the high school, the boxes and so forth. And then using Copier at the elementary level, but they're very busy right now. You're parking cars on Sunday, and for graduation. A lot of sun. You got some sun. And now they're busy. They're getting it ready. And that's if you went over to Kennedy today, if you drive by Kennedy now, like the what would that side be that I usually walk in? The northwest side. Think of the northwest side that has that where the faculty parking lot is, and there's that little entrance there. That now is torn up. They had some of the asphalt was already torn up. They're having a big, huge hole that is where the current kitchen is being built, being added onto. They were tearing up that. Like once kids got out of here, like they are going to town and getting going, which is great. That's what we need. They know that August is our deadline. They need to have this done. Locker rooms need to be done by August 1st because we have fall sports starting. So we gave up some of our locker room to be able to do that early, not spring sports, but it will help us in the fall. But there's a lot of moving pieces, and everyone's putting forth a lot of extra effort and really staying on top of some of those minor details that can become major, but staff have been great, and I'm really pleased with the work that they're doing. Anything I forgot?
Nope. I could give a little update on John Long Middle School. Yeah. So, we don't talk about it a lot, but we do have a lot of projects. So, roofing should be done. Re-roofing should be done in the next 2 weeks. Next week, 100% upgrade on the fire system. We're going to do a tie-in next week, so that will be done. Relighting, we will be working around summer school, doing that. And Part of that also will be upgrade security and door hardware, integrating the key system with the rest of the district. So we have the similar key system. And then right after summer school is done, the original building at John Long, which is the middle section, the classrooms have a splined ceiling system that will be removed and replaced. So we do have a lot of activity. It's just it's inside. You do not see it.
Yeah, and John Long is really our only building that's available throughout the summer. So as we're planning meetings, planning PD, maybe you can use the auditorium, but that's really about it, and there's no air conditioning. So it's, that really, so there's a lot of, we do realize that school, and we've been telling staff, the school is going to start, and there probably are going to be some areas that, that we weren't able at John Long especially, or even at the high school, if they're running late, so if that math room is full of stuff, it's full of classroom equipment, there's probably not going to be time for us to be able to take that equipment out, put it into new classrooms, go in and do a wax, do a tear down of the floor, buff it down, put a new wax on there. We're going to be starting the year with adding that in at various times throughout the year, and then next summer being on a normal cycle of stripping the floor and waxing it and so forth. So there are going to be some pieces that will be occurring through the year. We won't start September 4th and have everything done, but we also aren't going to stop on September 4th and just not worry about it for another 10 years. Like, we also know that we have long-range plans for addressing some of these things, but there are going to be some minor things that are going to be fine details that we'll come back and address in that way.
Any other questions?
What's the timing on when we'll know ballpark about the grant? Did they?
Yeah, so they're saying it's June.
We'll know, we should know before July approaches, whether or not we've received and how much we've received in terms of funding from the grant.
Because we have to stipulate that we will have it done by the beginning of the school. That's one of the things that they want. They want to know you're going to get it done this year. So, whether it's trauma-sensitive schools and getting a training set up and so forth, or whatever else it may be. But they want this money being used right away. You can't have sort of an idea. You actually have to have a bid and then be ready to say, we're ready to go, let's do this. So at the June meeting, though, that's when we thought we'd bring back, whether it's going to be a short video clip of each of the sites or pictures from each of the sites, but that'll be the focus for the June meeting for our construction update.
So I'd just like to say that Sunday, we were all there. For those that weren't there, I mean, a theme of a lot of the speeches and a lot of the comments that were made had to do with change and the resilience of kids, especially to cope and deal with that change. But I want to just say on behalf of the board, it wasn't just the kids that endured the change. It was all of our staff. I mean, and it's not just the change this year associated with the construction and all that goes with it. It's the emotional change of folks that are leaving a building. Some of them leaving a classroom that they've been in for 20 years, same classroom. So on behalf of the board, we do appreciate all of the effort that the staff has put in, not just finishing the year with integrity and pride and professionalism, but enduring the change throughout the year. And the patience that they will endure, certainly, for the changes that are yet to come. And there are some, there are more. And also on behalf of the board, thank you to the entire administration and to maintenance for, all Jamie, your staff, and Jeff, your staff, for all the effort and time that they put in, Linda, your staff, to plan and coordinate the changes that we've seen that we haven't seen in the district for 20 plus years. It is remarkable. And Bob, you're right. It comes down to how well it finishes. So that first good shot is off the tee is only as good as the next shot. I have complete confidence in administration, teaching staff, and everyone to deliver the project as planned. But we do thank you for all of the efforts that went into managing this change. So thank you. All right.
It's very exciting. I think everyone's going to be, I think teachers, when they get away and have a chance to rest, they're going to be super excited to start preparing right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
Probably not so excited in all honesty.
So then I would ask for a motion to adjourn into closed session. The board will convene in closed session to, 1, consider teacher compensation, 2, conduct public business in which competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This is in accordance with the Wisconsin State Statutes 1985, 1C and E.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
John, how do you vote? Yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
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 And yes.